Welcome. I'm here with Brian Ostroff, the president of Arianne Phosphate. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Brian. Phosphate may not be the first commodity that traders look to invest in as we're getting kicked off here, even as they search for ways to hedge against inflation in a bear market. One of your taglines is, "You can't drink oil or eat gold." Can you explain what that means and why phosphate stocks should be on any retail investor's radar?
Yeah, that's definitely one of my taglines. At the end of the day, I recognize that there are a lot of other commodities out there that people maybe pay a lot more attention to, and certainly ones that are sexier. But as you just said, you can't eat gold, you can't drink oil. Phosphate's what matters, because if you don't have phosphate, you don't have food. So, look, people should be paying attention for the simple reason, as I said, no phosphate, no food. As you drill into the phosphate macro, you come to realize that, it's kind of a scary world out there. Most of the phosphate that we get, we're reliant on parts of the world that I don't think you want to be reliant on, and most of the world runs a deficit, and that deficit is made up primarily by the Middle East and North Africa. As well, we definitely get some from China and Russia. So, we're seeing some unfortunate macro events here going on. Russia is now out of the market. China has actually halted their exports of phosphate fertilizers. And again, unfortunately, the Middle East from time to time has a history of flaring up. So, look, we need to recognize this. I think here in North America, we just assume that all is good. We'll get to the grocery store, the grains will be there. We have great soils here, but those soils, if they're not fed by fertilizer, those soils aren't going to be very productive for very long.
Understood. Now, agriculture stocks aren't always tied to the cycles of the overall market. Tell us a little bit more about the current trends in the phosphate sector and your predictions for the next few years on how this is going to continue to progress.
Yeah, great question. Historically, the agricultural commodities, the inputs, the fertilizers, they tend to run pretty long cycles. So in the case of phosphate fertilizer, the last cycle topped in 2012 and really didn't bottom until the end of 2019. So you were well over 7 years in a downtrend. Now, it was around summer of 2020 where things started to pick up. And so we've been at this, I guess, for a couple of years. Historically speaking, that would be a pretty short cycle. I think we've got some time to come. We've definitely had a pretty, decent size price move so far. But it is worth mentioning that when you're talking about, say, some of the phosphate-based fertilizers, we still have a significant way to go before we were to take out, say, the highs of 2008. So with that, I think there is opportunity. Again, I know that a lot of people aren't paying a whole lot of attention or haven't been. I guess recent news, people seeing food inflation and all of that has started to bring some attention back. And as I've said, for 7 years, we were in a fairly persistent downtrend. And when you're in a downtrend, no one really worries about supply. Supply didn't expand. Phosphate's one of those commodities where demand increases every single year. So after 7 years of no one worrying about supply and demand increasing and increasing and increasing, you kind of get to that tipping point, which is where we were in 2020. You sprinkle on a little global unrest, a little global protectionism, hot money supply, and the realization that, hey, we all want to eat when we wake up in the morning. And, I think that's kind of led us to where we are today. Unfortunately, I just really don't see things getting better. Supply chain is still challenged, and bringing a mine on stream takes quite some time. So I suspect these problems are going to be with us for a while. I suspect prices are going to remain high and quite possibly go even higher.
Got it. Okay, so pivoting just a little bit, how is Arianne Phosphate uniquely positioned to become a main player in helping to correct the phosphate shortage we're facing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, Arianne really is a best of class project for many reasons. First of all, it is extremely large. Today, it is the world's single largest greenfield phosphate deposit. It's situated here in Quebec, Canada. And as I had said earlier, Canada is a great mining jurisdiction. No one really has to concern themselves about security of supply, which again is becoming a greater and greater issue. And in the case of Arianne, without kind of diving too much into the geology, it is a relatively rare kind of deposit, which actually does allow you to make a very pure concentrate. Now, what does that mean? Well, most deposits will have significant contaminants in them, radioactive elements, heavy metals. That's not something that Arianne has. And when you're talking the food chain, that's really something you would prefer not to have in there.
Terrific. Okay, tell us a little bit more about the Greenfield Project. What sets Arianne Phosphate apart from similar companies, particularly pertaining to the sustainability of this project in particular?
Great. So, the Arianne project is quite advanced, as I had alluded to a little earlier. Mines don't just happen. They're a process. They're a lengthy process. The company has been at it pretty much over 10 years now, advancing the project through all the steps that you would imagine: the drilling, the metallurgy, the feasibility studies, all the way through to get to where it is today. Worth noting, the company is actually fully permitted, shovel ready. So, right there, that is a key differentiator from a lot of projects. Now, aside from the tremendous quality and economics of the project, it is a very ESG friendly project. So we are situated about 30 kilometers away from a hydroelectric dam. We've contracted for our life of mine supply. Today in production, 75% of our entire energy requirements, and that's from the mining, the processing, the shipping, down to the port and loading it. All of that, 75% of that will be used through, again, this clean, green, renewable energy. So, going back to my largest, purest, safest, it's also arguably amongst the cleanest.
Terrific. Brian Ostroff, president of Arianne Phosphate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. A lot of great information. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.